The alien ship was loud with shouting. Laughter and weapons clanking. It was a warship, full of warriors from all across the galaxy. But something strange was happening in the dining hall. The last cook had quit, ran away screaming after one meal. Now the warriors were hungry, angry, and very impatient. Then the doors opened, and a human walked in. He was not tall, not strong, not scary. He carried only a small bag and wore a simple apron. He didn't speak, just nodded at the officer who pointed to the kitchen. The officer looked confused. That's it? No hello, no name? The human just gave a small smile and walked in. Inside the kitchen, it was a mess. Burnt pans, rotten ingredients, strange alien insects crawling across the counters. He looked around calm. Then he started cleaning, one thing at a time. He didn't ask for help, didn't say a word. He moved like he had done this 1,000 times. The crew watching him whispered, "Why is he so quiet? Is he mute? Does he even know what we eat?" One brave alien stepped forward, a tall warrior with horns and bright red eyes. "You think you can cook for us?" he said, laughing. The human paused, looked at him, then simply said, "I can cook." That was all. Everyone laughed, but the captain, a strong and serious alien woman with silver armor and a scar across her face, said nothing. She was watching, silent, her eyes sharp like a blade. Then the smell hit them, warm, rich, spicy, and sweet all at once. The whole room fell silent, noses turning toward the kitchen. Something was cooking, and it smelled powerful, not alien, not human, but something between, something that made your heart slow down and your stomach wake up. The human worked quickly, using broken tools and unknown ingredients. He touched a bright green root and sniffed it, then cut it slowly and added it to a bubbling pot. He fried something that looked like a jellyfish with dust made from a glowing plant. Steam rose from the pot, carrying a smell no one could describe. 10 minutes later, he brought out a single bowl. He placed it on the table without a word. No one moved. The warrior with red eyes laughed again. "This better not kill me." He picked up a spoon and took one bite. Then he froze. His eyes widened. He made a strange sound in his throat and dropped the spoon. "More," he whispered, grabbing the bowl. "Give me more." The other warriors rushed forward, shouting, grabbing spoons, hands, anything. But the captain stepped forward, her voice like thunder. "Stop." She picked up the bowl and tasted one spoonful, then another and another. Then she looked at the human. "What is this?" she asked. He just shrugged. "I can cook," he said again. She stared at him for a long moment, then gave a small nod. From that moment on, the crew changed. They didn't laugh anymore. They watched, they waited. They lined up like children for meals. The human still didn't talk much. He just cooked, every dish different. Every dish better than the last, but no one knew his name. They just called him the cook, and they all knew this human, quiet and strange, was something special. He wasn't just feeding their stomachs, he was feeding their souls. And the warship would never be the same again. Word about the human cook spread fast. Other ships in the fleet began to whisper. "There's a human who cooks like a god." Some laughed. Some doubted, and some became jealous. On a nearby battle cruiser, a famous alien chef named Vorkon heard the news. He was big, loud, and proud, his forearms covered in medals from royal banquets and war feasts. Vorkon slammed a clawed hand on the table and growled, "A human? Outsmarting me? Not in this galaxy." He sent a message to the warship's captain. "I challenge your cook to a duel," it read. "Alien cuisine versus Earth food, one dish each. Judged by the Admiralty Council." The captain raised an eyebrow as she read it. She glanced at the human who was calmly slicing glowing mushrooms in the kitchen. She walked over and placed the message beside him. Without looking up, he just nodded once and said, "Okay." The next day, the two ships met in neutral orbit. The judges arrived, high-ranking officials, warlords, and even a scholar from the taste archives. The challenge was simple. Make one dish using a difficult ingredient, thorned worm leaf, a rare alien plant known to be dangerous to humans. Its smell alone could make humans dizzy, and its touch caused skin to itch for hours. Vorkon laughed as he watched the human prepare. "Don't cry when you faint, little Earthman," he said with a grin. The crowd chuckled. The human didn't reply. He wore gloves, touched the plant gently, and began to work. Vorkon went wild. Fire, steam, flashing knives, and shouting assistants surrounded him. His dish looked like art, glowing and floating above the plate. It sparkled in the light, smelling of power and spice. The human, meanwhile, Used only a small flame in one pan. He moved slowly, adding crushed roots, a drop of blue sap, and something he brought from Earth. A small bag of flour. No machines, no noise, no helpers, just him, the pan, and the scent of quiet patience. The crowd grew restless. "This is boring," someone whispered. "What's he making? Bread? No, wait. Smell that," another said, leaning closer. A gentle warmth floated from the pan, not sharp, not loud, but comforting, like home. Even aliens who had never seen Earth felt something deep inside their chest. Old memories, childhood smells, forgotten peace. Time was up. Both chefs placed their dishes on the long crystal table. Vorkon stood proudly beside his, spiced worm leaf over lava rice topped with singing frost berries. The human placed his down quietly. Flatbread folded over thin slices of cured worm leaf with golden sauce dripping down the edge. The judges came forward. They tried Vorkon's dish first. They nodded in respect. It was powerful, elegant, full of flavor. Then they tried the humans. One judge paused. Then another took a longer bite, then another. Silence. The Taste Archive scholar stood up slowly, wiping a tear from his reptilian eye. "This is balance," he whispered. "It doesn't fight the senses, it welcomes them." Even Vorkon looked shaken. His arms dropped to his sides. His mouth half open, the winner was clear. The captain stepped beside the human and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You won," she said softly. He gave a small smile and nodded. "I can cook," he said again. The crowd cheered. Though many didn't understand what had just happened, it wasn't just about food, it was about heart. About calm, about connection. After the contest, a little alien child walked up to the human and tugged his sleeve. "Can you teach me to cook like that?" she asked. He knelt down and handed her a small wooden spoon from Earth. "Start with this," he said, her eyes lit up. And she held it like treasure. Vorkon, beaten for the first time in years, walked over and stood in silence. Then he bowed. "You're not just a cook," he said. "You're something more." But the human shook his head. "No," he said. "I just know how to feed people." Then he turned and walked back to the ship. Quiet, simple, and still. The galaxy had seen fire, war, and noise. But now it was starting to notice the power of a quiet meal cooked by human hands. The ship's kitchen was never quiet anymore, not because of noise, but because of attention. Every time the human stepped inside, curious eyes peeked around corners. Warriors who used to mock food now watched like children watching magic. Every meal he made was different, and every dish made them feel something new. But nobody understood how. There were no advanced machines, no glowing tools, no assistant drones, just a man, a knife, and old metal pots. Yet what he made could make a warrior cry, could make a homesick pilot feel like they were back in their mother's arms. One day, a young medic named Zika decided to investigate. She was clever, curious, and known for asking too many questions. She pretended to drop by the kitchen with a casual injury. The human gave her a warm roll wrapped in leaves and a cold drink. She ate silently while watching him slice a strange orange root. "Do you use medical herbs in your food?" she asked. He looked at her, then at the pot, and said, "Some things help more when eaten." Zika's eyes narrowed. Later that night, she took samples from the leftover plates and ran tests in the lab. What she found shocked her. The spices he used weren't just flavorful. They had healing properties. Real ones. Anti-inflammatory, muscle-relaxing, immune-boosting, even cell regeneration support. She reported it to the captain. "This man is cooking medicine," Zika said. "But he's not calling it that." The captain stared at the report, then at the kitchen on the monitor. "Does he know?" Zika nodded. "I think he does, but he's not saying anything." That night, the captain walked into the kitchen. The crew went silent as she approached. He was stirring a pot slowly, the steam rising like a calm river. "You know what your food does, don't you?" she asked. He didn't answer at first, then he said, "Food can hurt or heal." She stepped closer. "So which one are you doing to us?" He looked at her and said, "Depends on what you need." She stared at him, trying to read something deeper. Then she gave a slow nod. "Carry on, cook," and just like that, she turned and walked out. From that day, more injured soldiers visited the kitchen instead of the med bay. They came with bruises, headaches, sore joints. He gave them meals made with soft greens and warm spices. And somehow they walked out feeling better. No injections, no surgeries, just soup, stew, and flatbread. One day, the ship's old general came limping in. His knees were damaged from years of battle. He had refused replacement limbs out of pride. The crew helped him sit as the human placed a small bowl in front of him. The old man scoffed, "You think food can fix me?" The human said nothing, just stepped back. The general took a bite, then another, then finished the entire bowl in silence. He sat still for a while, then slowly stood up. The pain wasn't gone, but something inside him felt lighter. His steps steadied, and he didn't need help to leave the room. The crew watched in awe. "This cook is something else," someone whispered. "He's not just feeding us, he's repairing us," but no one could understand how. Where did he learn this? Was it human science? Was it instinct? Or something more? One night, a young alien girl from the cleaning crew found him sitting alone. She had always been too scared to speak to him. But that night, she stepped forward and asked, "Why do you cook like this?" He looked at the empty plate in his hand and said, "Because when I was little, someone cooked for me like this when I was broken." The girl sat down beside him quietly. He handed her a piece of soft, sweet bread, and they sat in silence, eating together. The next day, a small corner of the dining hall had a new sign. Painted in many alien languages, it read, "Healing table, come hungry." Leave whole more aliens visited the kitchen, not just warriors, but engineers, janitors, even high officers. They came with broken hearts, stress, sorrow, and memories of war, and they left with full bellies and lighter souls. He didn't speak much, but everyone who ate his food said the same thing. "It's like he knew exactly what I needed," but still the question remained. How did he know? What was he hiding? And how far could one quiet human cook really go in a galaxy that only respected strength? The answer would come soon, but not in words. It would come in fire, blood, and something that only food could stop. The cook had become more than just a mystery. He was now a quiet legend aboard the warship. His meals healed pain, warmed cold hearts, and made soldiers sleep without nightmares. But not everyone liked the change, and not everyone trusted him. Whispers began to grow in the lower decks. "He's doing something strange to the food. Maybe he's using chemicals, earth tricks. Maybe he's controlling us." One alien in particular, Lieutenant Grell, a security officer with sharp claws and a deep dislike for humans, watched the cook closely. He believed warriors needed pain to grow stronger. Not comfort. To him, food was fuel, nothing more. And this silent cook was turning killers into poets. One day, Grell stood outside the kitchen. Staring inside, the cook was preparing lunch as always, calm, steady, quiet. The smells were soft and warm, the kind that made even angry hearts pause. But Grell's eyes narrowed, full of suspicion. He waited until the cook stepped away for a moment. Then Grell slipped inside the kitchen. He pulled a small vial from his belt, clear liquid. No scent, no color. A drop could cause stomach pain, dizziness, and worse. He opened a spice jar and poured the vial in, then walked away without a sound. He didn't want to kill. He just wanted to prove the cook was not special. That without his magic meals, the crew would return to strength and anger. But fate had other plans. That same afternoon, a small alien girl came into the kitchen. Her name was Jala, a cleaner from the maintenance crew. She often came early, sitting quietly and watching the cook slice and stir. She never spoke, only smiled when he passed her a small piece of bread or a drink. That day she was early, hungry, and curious. The cook had stepped out, and a bowl of prepped food sat steaming on the side. She reached for it. Just one bite, she thought. Just a small taste, but as soon as the food touched her tongue, her face changed. She dropped the bowl, stumbled back, and fell. Her small body began shaking, her eyes rolling, breath short. The cook returned to find her on the floor. His eyes widened just slightly, but his hands moved fast. He picked her up, laid her gently on the counter, and opened a small wooden box from Earth. Inside were powders, crushed leaves, and oils. He mixed a thick green paste with water and poured it into her mouth, then waited, hand on her forehead. Watching her breathe, minutes passed like hours. The crew had gathered, frozen in shock. Jala coughed, then gasped, then blinked. She was alive. The medic arrived late, too late to help, but not too late to realize what had happened. "Someone poisoned the food," she said. Checking the bowl, the captain arrived seconds later, her face hard as stone. The crew looked at the cook, expecting him to speak, to shout, to accuse, but he said nothing. He wiped Jala's face gently with a cloth, then returned to the kitchen and cleaned the spilled food. As if nothing had happened, the captain turned to the crew. Voice sharp, "Who did this?" Silence. Lieutenant Grell stepped forward. Arms crossed. "This is what happens when we trust outsiders," he said loudly. But his voice cracked just slightly. The captain stared at him, eyes narrowing. "We'll find out the truth," she said, and walked away. That night, no one slept well. The kitchen was quiet. But the ship was tense. Rumors flew, trust cracked, and fear crept in. But the cook still showed up in the morning, still made breakfast, still handed out warm flatbread, hot soup and quiet nods. Even Jala, still pale and recovering, came back and sat on her usual stool. He passed her a small bowl, and she smiled with tired eyes. No one spoke, but everyone felt it. Something had changed. Later that day, security found the empty vial in Grell's locker. He was arrested, stripped of rank, and taken away without a word as he passed the kitchen. He looked at the human and said, "You made them weak." The human didn't even look up. He just stirred the soup slowly and said, "They were already broken. I just helped them feel full again," and with that, Grell was gone, but the scar he left remained now. Every bite came with a new feeling. Gratitude, trust, and silent fear. Would it happen again? Could it happen again? Still the cook stayed, still he cooked, and still he said nothing. But from that day on, every meal tasted just a little bit stronger, a little bit safer, a little bit human. The warship had barely recovered from the poisoning. The cook said nothing, as always, but the crew looked at him differently now. They respected him before. Now they followed him with quiet loyalty. Even warriors who once mocked him now stood straighter when he passed. His food had healed wounds, hearts, and even caught a traitor. But his biggest test was still waiting. One morning, an urgent message came through the main console. The Grand Council of the Galactic Alliance was arriving in 3 days. The warship had been chosen to host a high-level inspection. Every detail had to be perfect, especially the banquet. The captain frowned, her armor clicking as she walked into the kitchen. The cook was already kneading dough, the flour floating in the air like mist. She watched him for a moment, then said, "We've got trouble." "Cook?" He didn't stop working, just glanced at her calmly. "The Alliance Council is coming," she said. "They expect a grand feast." He said nothing. Just nodded once. She folded her arms. "They're used to gold-plated platters, sky beasts, and rare venomous wines. Still," he said nothing. One officer leaned in and whispered, "We should hire a royal chef just for the event." But the captain shook her head. "No," she said, "he stays." She looked at the cook again. "Can you do this?" This time he looked her in the eye and said, "I cook for the soul, not the crown." She blinked, then smiled faintly. "Good," she said. "Then feed their souls." The next 3 days were a blur of movement. The cook didn't sleep much. He stayed in the kitchen, preparing ingredients from every corner of the ship. He used alien roots, human herbs, animal fat, fermented fruit, dried flowers, and even old tea leaves from Earth. No machines, no noise, just the rhythm of chopping, boiling, roasting, and mixing. On the day of the banquet, the great hall sparkled with polished stone and flickering lights. The council arrived in golden robes, floating seats, and scented air. Their eyes were cold, their mouths ready to judge. One raised an eyebrow at the plain wooden bowls being placed in front of them. "This is the feast?" One of them asked. "No decoration?" said another. The captain said nothing, just motioned for them to try the food. They took a bite, then another, and then they stopped speaking. A silence fell across the table. The warrior crew watched from the shadows, waiting. Then a councilwoman put her spoon down and closed her eyes. "This reminds me of my mother's voice," she whispered. Another said, "This tastes like when I first held my child." One councilman dropped his fork and wiped his eyes. "I haven't felt this human in decades," he said. The cook didn't watch them. He was back in the kitchen preparing the second course. He plated a soft stew made from marinated roots and meat soaked in moon honey and spices. The smell made even the guards take deep breaths, their hands relaxing on their weapons. When dessert came, baked fruit wrapped in leaves with sweet cream, the council was no longer sitting stiff. They were laughing, telling stories, remembering songs from their youth. The mood had changed completely. The captain stood at the end of the hall, arms behind her back, proud after the final course. The head of the council stood. "We've dined in royal palaces, among empires and galaxies," she said, "but never like this." She turned to the captain. "Your ship has something no other fleet has. The captain smiled slightly. A good kitchen? The councilwoman shook her head. A healer who uses no medicine. A warrior who carries no weapon. The cook stepped out at last, wiping his hands on a simple cloth. The head council member looked at him and asked, "What are you, truly?" He shrugged. "I just cook." There was silence. Then the council applauded, not polite claps, but real, honest applause. The cook bowed slightly, then returned to his kitchen. As always, he left quietly, letting the food speak for him. That night, across the stars, messages were sent to other ships: find the human cook. Find the man who makes memories taste real again. But no one could copy what he did, because it wasn't in the ingredients, or the tools, or even the techniques. It was in the silence, the care, the stillness. And in that great hall, long after the council left, the scent of home still lingered in the air, like a quiet promise that the galaxy, no matter how big or broken, still had room for a man who cooked with his heart. It was supposed to be a simple supply run. The warship traveled with a convoy of medical cruisers and fuel barges. No enemies nearby, no danger reported, just stars, silence, and routine. The cook prepared his meals as usual. He had made a new dish that morning: crispy root slices wrapped around spiced protein paste. The crew was excited, already lining up with their trays and jokes. But then, without warning, the sirens screamed. "Enemy strike vessels incoming," a voice shouted through the ship's speakers. Explosions rocked the metal halls. The lights flickered and smoke filled the air. The ship shook violently as enemy fighters broke through the outer shields. Chaos exploded across every corridor. In the kitchen, pots fell, fire sparked, and steam hissed. The cook was thrown to the floor, his arm cut by a flying piece of glass. He didn't cry out, didn't panic. He stood up, bleeding, and looked around at the wrecked room. Flames burned near the spice rack, and the water line was broken. The crew was running, shouting, grabbing weapons. But the cook did something different. He grabbed a metal pot, a cutting board, and a bag of saved ingredients. Then, he walked toward the lower mess bay, where wounded soldiers were being brought in. The power was out, the walls cracked, and the air smelled like metal and blood. People lay on the floor, burned, scared, trembling. Some had lost limbs, others had lost hope. A medic looked up at the cook in disbelief. "You can't cook now," she said. "We need help." Not food, but the cook just knelt beside a heating vent. He cleared a flat space, placed his pan, and lit a small flame using backup coils. Then he began. He moved slowly, calmly, slicing dried fruit, soaking grains, mixing pastes. Steam rose gently as the first dish simmered. Even through smoke and fear, the scent floated into the room. A young warrior, bandaged and moaning, turned his head. "What is that smell?" he whispered. Another soldier lifted herself up on one elbow. "Is someone cooking?" The medic frowned, then watched as the wounded began to stir. Eyes opened, breath steadied. The cook said nothing. He passed around small bowls. Hot, soft food, easy to swallow. Each bite brought silence, then tears. Not from pain, but from something deeper. For a moment, the battle outside didn't matter. Inside this broken room there was peace. More wounded were carried in. The cook stayed by the flame, cooking with one injured hand wrapped in cloth. He never stopped, never sat. He fed every single one. One officer entered the room covered in ash. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "This is a battlefield." The cook handed him a bowl. "Then eat like it," he said. The officer took one bite. His face froze. He sat down slowly and didn't speak again. By nightfall, the ship's power returned. The enemy was pushed back, emergency repairs began, and the fire was controlled. But the memory of that small fire pit in the mess bay stayed with everyone. The next day, the captain came to visit. She found the cook in the damaged kitchen, already cleaning the soot and broken glass. His arm was stitched, his eyes tired, but his movement steady. She stood in the doorway and said nothing for a while. Then she said, "What kind of man chooses to cook in a war?" He looked at her. "The kind who's seen worse than war," he said softly. She stepped closer. "The crew won't forget this," she said. "You gave them something no weapon ever could." He didn't answer, just nodded and returned to wiping the counters. But the crew did remember. They told stories of the cook who fed them while the ship burned, of the man who used no gun, no armor, just food, and still, he made them feel alive. After that day, a plaque was placed outside the mess bay. It read, "In the fire he fed us, and the cook? He just went back to work." One pot, one plate, one quiet smile at a time. The war was over. The enemy fleet had surrendered, and the stars were quiet again. The crew walked through the halls with slower steps and lighter shoulders. But something felt different. Something was coming to an end. The cook still worked in his kitchen just like before. He still wore his apron, still used the same wooden spoon. He didn't speak much. But the crew didn't need words anymore. They knew how he felt through the flavors, the smell, the warmth of his meals. But one morning, the kitchen door didn't open on time. No breakfast smell floated down the hall. No sound of boiling, no sound of chopping. The crew grew nervous. The captain arrived quickly, stepping inside the quiet kitchen. There he was, sitting at the table. Already dressed, already packed, his small bag was on the floor beside him, and his apron was folded neatly on the counter. The captain frowned. "Going somewhere?" she asked, even though she already knew. He looked up and said, "I think it's time." "You're leaving?" she asked, softer now. He nodded. "The crew is strong now," he said. "They don't need me anymore." She stepped forward. Unsure what to say, he had no rank, no badge, no medals. But he had done more than most officers ever could. He had changed the ship, the people, the silence between them. "We could make you head of galley command," she offered. "Double rations, full rank." He smiled gently. "I didn't come for that." Outside the kitchen, a small crowd had gathered. The young cleaner girl Jala held a folded cloth. His backup apron, the old general who once limped, now stood straight and saluted him. Medics, engineers, warriors, every one of them waited silently, holding plates, bowls, or nothing at all. They didn't want to stop him. They just wanted one last thing. He stood up slowly and said, one more what?" the captain asked. "One last meal," he said. And so for the final time, he stepped into the kitchen. The crew watched from the windows as he moved through the smoke-stained room. He pulled out a few ingredients, nothing fancy, just what was left: old grain, sweet paste, broken roots, a small bottle of earth spice. He cooked slowly, calmly, like always. No one helped, no one spoke. The ship was completely silent, not because of fear, but respect. The smell rose, thick and comforting. He stirred gently, then folded the mixture into bread and laid it over heat. Soon the kitchen filled with soft golden light, the kind that only came from one thing: a meal made with memory. When the food was ready, he stepped out with a single tray. No extra servings, no refills. One small piece for each person. He walked through the crowd, handing them out by hand. Each warrior, officer, and worker held the food like it was a gift. Because it was. When the captain received hers, she held it for a moment, then asked, "What do you call this dish?" He looked at her and said, "Goodbye." They ate slowly, quietly. The food was soft, warm, and full of something none of them could name. It tasted like peace, like thank you, like an ending. Afterward, the cook picked up his bag and walked toward the ship's docking bay. No one stopped him. No one begged him to stay. Because they understood now. He wasn't just a cook, he was a moment, a healing, a lesson. As he stepped onto the small transport shuttle, Jala ran forward and held out his apron. He smiled, took it, and folded it gently. Then he whispered something to her. No one else heard, but she nodded through teary eyes. The door closed, the shuttle pulled away, and just like that he was gone, but his recipe remained. Not written down, not stored in machines, but living inside the hearts of those he fed. From that day forward, every ship in the fleet started its own mess bay tradition. They called it the human table. Once a week, every crew sat together, no weapons, no ranks, just food and silence. They remembered him not with statues or songs, but with warmth, with kindness, and with the smell of bread in the air. Because in a galaxy full of fire and war, it was one silent cook who reminded them that the most powerful thing a human can do is feed a broken soul back to life.